So, first up we have the cult classic I Spit on Your Grave, also known as Day of the Woman, which is a pretty atrocious title, in my opinion. The plot is quite simple. A woman goes to a sort of secluded foresty area to get away from civilization so she can walk and ride in a book. And then she is raped. Then she is raped again. Then also raped again over the course of 5 hours. She's unhappy about this. So she goes out to get revenge on those who have raped her. Yeah.
Hang on, I just have to say, she's unhappy about it.
Well, understandably so.
Bit of an understatement, I guess.
So basically, she just goes to get her revenge on those who raped her. And that's honestly pretty much the movie. The first 20 minutes or so is sort of set up. Then we, about 20 minutes to about an hour in is constant rape. It's, if
I don't know, it's just kind of like the way you're delivering some of these lines, yeah.
Well, if you've seen the movie, you would know that this section of the movie is probably one of the hardest to sit through.
Yeah. I just want to make it clear, I'm not laughing at
yes.
rape.
I think it's both of us, as we discuss this movie, it can be clear how disgusting we find these acts. I mean, I would say the actors were really good for the rapists. I mean, those are some really despicable people. But anyhow, and then the last about 30 minutes or so of the movie is the individual getting her revenge. So it's a somewhat simple movie. Very, a woman gets raped, then this revenge, rape and revenge. So.
I'm sorry, I need to compose myself.
This could be like an extra feature.
Okay, I need to like think of chairs or something.
Disengage from the situation. It'll be okay.
Okay.
So, I Spit on Your Grave, if you've seen it, it's a very, like I said, it's a hard to watch movie. Because it's in the 70s, it's a very gritty movie. It takes itself very seriously. And unlike 80s horror movies, there's not a whole lot of fun things going on. There's also not much of a cast, but those who are in the movie do pretty well. If you can get past the rape scene... Yeah, I'm sorry if that happened.
I'm like sitting here covering my mouth while you're talking, hoping that you won't like say something that's going to tip me over.
Okay.
And then you start laughing first. Okay. Yeah.
I just need a few more seconds.
I must say, I never expected
this to be the movie.
This segment to get this kind of reaction, but yeah.
It's a satisfying revenge.
I'm not sure how we're going to get through this one.
I'm probably going to shortly ask you your views on the movie. So
yeah.
I'll just try to just do one more sentence just to finish off my. I wish you luck.
God damn. Okay, I'll try and compose myself and let you finish. don't even remember anymore what sparked the whole laughing thing.
Okay. I got to jinx that thing. Okay. If you're a fan of slashers, we may want to. We may want to. I call it audible. Maybe do the next movie, the second movie, maybe do the first. If maybe that will give us time to get over this. Unless you want to try to carry on.
I think we're just gonna have to try and power through this one,
Okay.
and then maybe once we get through it, we can, kind of forget about it.
Yeah, maybe we can forget whether there's the two guys laughing about rape.
Well, I'm not laughing about rape itself, but yeah, just continue.
Yes, the revenge portions of this movie are pretty good if you can make it to that point.
Okay, so this movie, I didn't watch it recently.
Out of interest, how recently have you seen?
January 2018.
Oh, okay.
So not that long ago, but a bit over a year ago. It's certainly not one of those movies that I watch very often for obvious reasons, because it is quite a tough movie to watch at times. Even though some of the rape in the movie, it is... Yeah. See, you're the one laughing at the word rape.
I'm going to mute my microphone while you talk.
Okay. The rape scenes in the movie, they do come off a little goofy at times, a little silly, though still, despite that, it's still quite a lot of rape to be watching. It's kind of like a bit of a yin and yang of violence. Some of the violence, like the rape portion, while it's can be tough to watch, it's kind of necessary for the violence later in the film that takes place during the revenge. So without one, the other doesn't really work. So you kind of need both of it. While the act of rape is it's something you don't want to see.
Yeah, so it makes sense in the context of the film. Yeah. Out of interest, how many other rape revenge movies have you seen? Off the top of your head.
Miss 45, which I think is probably the best one that I've seen. Then again, I don't really have too many off the top of my head that come to mind. There probably are some that I have seen and I'm just forgetting about.
Yeah, I'll say when it comes to this movie, and this is a movie I've seen before. If you've seen the movie, it's not the type of movie, in my opinion, that you're about to watch like once a year. It's not like it's a Halloween type movie. This type of movie, in my opinion, probably only could have been made in the 70s. If they had made this in the 80s, it probably would have come off feeling, probably quite a bit goofy, and in my opinion, probably quite a lot worse. The 70s was a very influential decade for horror, so I think it makes sense in the product of its time, even though the movie itself may not be the most enjoyable experience. Out of interest, what's your favorite revenge scene?
Probably the toughest one is the bathtub scene.
Yes. Yeah, I will say one thing about that. This is probably quite understandable. I didn't have much sympathy, actually any sympathy, for like most of the guys, because of what they did to this woman. Some people just don't necessarily deserve sympathy. But even that scene made me cringe a bit, and I thought it's probably one of the better done scenes in the movie.
Well, I mean, a lot of people call it the ultimate feminist movie, and I guess if that's a convenient tag for it, fine, but I don't think that's what they were really intending when they made the movie. I think they're just trying to make something very exploitative and just something that's going to shock people, really.
Yeah, it is interesting, because I've heard some individuals claim this movie sort of empowers women, whereas others claim it's sort of degrading toward women. So I can see both viewpoints,
Yeah.
And it definitely can lead to an interesting conversation, because it's not uncommon when people label the whole of the horror genre as like anti-women. And this movie is probably one they would point at and say, "Hey, see what they did." I don't know. This is one of those movies that I like a lot of the technical aspects about it. I really like the 70s feel to it. But as for the content, especially during like the sort of middle of the movie, it just, I mean, I can get through it, and I've seen probably movies that are a bit worse, but it's just not something I really want to find myself watching. And it's pretty good for, I guess, shock value, but I mean, let's be honest, after the first rape sequence, it could probably be argued that the other two are just overkill.
Yeah, it goes on and on and on, and until you get to a point where they have to do something different.
And that's actually another interesting thing I wanted to mention. Because of the length of some of these scenes, there can come a point where what's on screen may not even necessarily be. It sort of dehumanizes it. It makes it seem more ridiculous, and I can imagine some people watching it, and the longer it goes on, they sort of lose interest. Oh, hey, this isn't that bad anymore. I don't know. It's just one of the things where it's an interesting choice, and I'm not sure how much value, especially that second scene, the second rape scene. I understand the one in the house, but the one in the wards just seemed like, I don't know. I don't think they even needed that one there. It was probably just another excuse for some nude scenes for everyone in the movie. Now, out of interest, I was just going to ask, do you remember the first time you saw this one?
Yeah, I actually saw it. I think I bought the movie before I had even seen it, so it was probably in somewhere around the mid 2000s. I hear that a lot of different countries have, cut versions of the movie, and when it came out on DVD in Australia, I think we were one of the very few places that actually got it uncut. So, being an uncut movie, quite a controversial movie, especially at that time of DVD hitting its peak, I guess that propelled me to, buy it and watch it, and it's okay. You can look at it one way and be, this movie is kind of really stupid and crappy, and then on the other hand, the revenge aspect of it does leave you feeling somewhat satisfied to a degree, and that helps you enjoy at least a portion of the movie.
Yeah, and like I said before, I also want to mention that the actors involved did a really good job, especially the lead actress, Camille Keaton. I'm not sure if that's quite how you pronounce her name, but she did a fantastic job in this. And you can definitely feel sympathy for her, especially once everything is done and she's just, well, basically like a shell of her former self. The rape was hard to watch, but even the aftermath was a really grueling thing to get through. So when she can finally pick herself up and go after these individuals who did this to her, from then on out, it's, like Chucky said, it's pretty satisfying.
Yeah.
Even though I sort of wish some of the deaths were a bit more drawn out.
I assume you saw that they did have another I Spit on Your Grave movie come out. I think it's Deja Vu.
Yeah, I've heard extraordinarily negative things about that. No, I've not seen it, but I've heard negative things about it.
Yeah, I've heard about how it's unnecessarily long, like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, this is not supposed to be a midsummer type movie.
And, but, it does have, I believe, the lead actress from the original in it. I'm not sure how big her role is. I think it's just one of those movies that I haven't seen it yet, but I from what I hear, it's just kind of cashing in on the controversial nature of this original movie.
And there's also I think you alluded to this earlier, there's also a remake of this. And that remake had, I think, 2 sequels.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a name that's decently known in the horror community. And people can probably make money making, more I Spit on Your Grave movies. Which is, I don't know. If they're done well, I guess, more power to them. But if they're just going to be the sort of as tedious as this one could sometimes be, I'm not sure how much it's worth it.
And I know that it was Roger Ebert's most hated movie of all time. So
Oh, I didn't know that, but that would make sense.
Unless something overtook it at some point, but last time I saw him say that it was his most hated movie of all time.
I think, as far as this one goes, I mean, if you've seen it, you can see it's a decently made movie, and it has a really nice feel to it. But like we said, the content can sometimes be a bit much to get through, and once it keeps going and going, it can sometimes even feel a bit goofy despite the horrific nature of the content. I've seen this one twice now. I did love it either times. I'd probably give this one an average rating, probably around a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I've got a fairly similar opinion on that, with my rating being a 6 out of 10, and my 6 is still somewhere around average, whereas your 7 is still somewhere around average.
Yes.
Since we work on slightly different scales, but yeah, it's a movie that can be tough to watch at times, despite some of the rape in the movie being a little goofy. You could chalk that up to being such a low-budget film. The revenge part's somewhat satisfying given the 30-40 minutes of rape.
I will say, if there's any reason to see this movie, you should probably see it for the bathtub scene. And you can probably just find it online. But it's probably, honestly, if you're a fan of the horror genre, especially 70s horror, especially Last House on the Left, actually, this might be your type of thing.
And if there's anyone out there who's been listening to this and they heard our outbursts of laughter, they may think it's one of the best comedies of all time, but we promise you it's not that funny.
In fact, there's very few amusing, like many 70s movies, there's very few amusing one-liners in this, so, I don't know, it's, in my opinion, it's a difficult movie to talk about, because, well, I don't know, if you've seen it, you probably know how we feel. I don't know anybody who's a, quote-unquote die-hard fan of this one. Many people enjoy it, maybe tolerate it, but it's not one of those movies that has at least in my experience, has like a giant uber fan base. Probably for good reason.